Hello, my name is Alejandro Ramirez, and today I will be talking about psychoanalytical criticism and viewing it through the film As Above, So Below. So, in summary, the film is about a group of explorers that venture into the Paris catacombs searching for the legendary Philosopher's Stone. As they descend deeper into the catacombs, they are forced to confront terrifying supernatural phenomena and personal traumas, realizing that the true horror lies within themselves. And characters that I will be mentioning today include Scarlett, George, Latope, and Benji. So, what is exactly psychoanalytical criticism? According to Old Dominion University, psychoanalytical criticism calls for the understanding of the unconscious, the repressed mind, in order to understand the human life experience, culture, language, and ultimately society, because the text and critics can only be analyzed as if it's a dream. Topics that I will be discussing about that lie under psychoanalytical criticism are the unconscious, repression, and Freudian theory about id, ego, and superego. So, the unconscious. According to a critical theory today by Lois Tyson, the unconscious is the storehouse of those painful experiences and emotions, those wounds, fears, and guilty desires and unresolved conflicts we do not want to know about because we feel that we will be overwhelmed by them. So Scarlett, who is the main character in the film, is actively trying to look for the Philosopher's Stone, and she's not doing it to for her to keep it or anything like that. It's because her dad was also trying to actively look for it, but he unfortunately did pass away in the film by committing suicide, and we don't know why until towards the end of the film. And I will touch on why that's important because it does relate to psychoanalytic criticism. But she gathers a group of her friends and other people that she had found that could help her find the stone. But as they go deeper into the catacombs, they realize that they are literally on hell on earth, and they have to face these past traumas and repressions that they have previously went through on earth. And I saw that the catacombs acts as the unconscious because as they go deeper into the catacombs to get out, they have to face these fears and these past experiences that they have repressed. And in order for them to escape alive, they would have to almost rectify themselves and just kind of confess their sins in the catacombs. And I see that as the unconscious because, as stated, it's a place where we don't really think about. We kind of just, we did something bad. We don't want to think about it anymore. So we press them into the unconscious. And since, none of them besides Scarlett really wanted to go into the catacombs, it really is a metaphor of the unconscious as, as they go deeper, they have to relive these past traumas or just kind of, confess of like, yes, I did this and I am sorry. And a lot of the characters do not do that, and it does end up into their death in the film. So I really think that this is a really good example of the unconscious, and it also ties into repression. So for repression, a lot of the characters have gone through a lot in the film before this. So for example, Scarlett, as I mentioned before, her father did commit suicide, but the reason he committed suicide was because, well, we don't know really why, but Scarlett had received a phone call the night of his death, and she did not pick up the phone. I'm pretty sure she was partying, or she was really mad at her father at the time, and she feels guilty because that phone call could have prevented her dad's suicide, and she felt a lot of guilt, and she just repressed it and within her unconscious. And same with George, which is Scarlett's ex in the film. He could have saved his brother from drowning, but he didn't. And there's a lot of correlations within the catacombs of people drowning or hearing like a little kid's voice of just asking for George's help. And a lot of these repressions come out within the unconscious, which is like the catacomb. And it's a really good example of how the repression and the unconscious ties into the film. And it's a really good way to look at it because a lot of us, we don't really think about our unconscious or repression because we don't actively want to remember those things. But in the film, in order for them to escape, they have to go deeper and deeper. And as the deeper they go, they have to face these repressions that they put aside. And it's a really good film. I really recommend watching it, but it's really interesting to view it as in a psychoanalytical lens because a lot of it ties into a lot of the topics that the psychoanalytical criticism touches bases on. Finally, I will touch bases on Freudian's theory of the id, ego, and superego. So, according to simple psychology, the id, ego, and superego are components of Freud's psychoanalytical theory. The id represents our basic instincts and desires, seeking immediate gratification. The ego, guided by reality, balances the id's impulses by social norms. The superego is our moral conscience, pushing us to follow ethical standards. Together, they shape our behavior and personality. So, in my notes, I saw a lot of these concepts within the movie. So, for example, for the id, it represents our desires and our instinctual self, and I almost saw catacombs as well as the id because it's a place of dark and hidden space within our mind, because it's all like our trauma and guilt and fear that we try to repress and not think about it a lot. And the characters' behaviors themselves have also showed the id of irrational fears, hallucinations, and emotional breakdowns as their instincts are triggered. And a lot of the other metaphors that I saw were depending on like what their repression was. For example, Let's Hope, he left his friend in a burning fire or in a burning car. So a lot of it, like those little things can also represent the id. For the ego, I saw Scarlett as the ego in the group or in the film because she is very logical, she's very self-driven, she is like the leader of the group, and she tries to maintain control within not only herself but within her group, because she, although she owns up to what like her guilt was about her father's suicide, she tries to maintain herself and not to get overwhelmed within the environment that they're in. And she tries to be more logical within what's going on rather than just break down and just think of the worst. And that's what a lot of the other characters were doing, which ultimately led to some of their deaths. And for the superego, as it represents guilt and social norms, I saw it as like the character's guilt of like George's brother dying, or like her or Scarlett's father. And as they go deeper into the catacombs, it's like a symbolic punishment as they're going through into the catacombs. It's the superego basically punishing them for all the wrongdoings that they did. So a lot of these concepts, the id, ego, and superego, can be seen throughout the whole film, but those were just some examples that I thought were very meaningful and just that stood out to me the most. To me, psychoanalytical criticism is very important because a lot of the topics that I talked about today were just repressions and the unconscious, and it's all of these things that I talk about is things we don't really think about. Unlike other lenses that I've talked about, like queer, feminist, a lot of those like we kind of like think about, even if we aren't necessarily thinking it's a lens. But when it comes to psychoanalytical criticism, I like it because I like to psychoanalyze a lot of things, whether it be films, people, my environment. So I really loved this part of the lesson, and I hope that a lot of you guys kind of refresh your memory on like what psychoanalytical criticism is, because a lot of the times we don't really think about that. While we really are psychoanalyzing a lot of things in our life, whether we realize it or not. So thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new or just refreshed your memory on.